Hey everyone, this is John from EastCoastArmory.com, and I'm here today with another new product announcement video for the various new 1/16 scale EastCoastArmory.com M1 Abrams main battle tank detail part sets. All of the components in this video have been listed to the 1/16 scale catalog page, and that can be found right there on the bottom of your screen, and a direct link can also be found in the video description. There are a bunch of new 1/16 scale detail components to mention, and it's definitely something that you want to stick around and watch, specifically if you have the Heng Long 1/16 scale M1 and you're looking to spice it up and make it something that's a bit more polished from the kit original. With that out of the way, let's go ahead and get this one kicked off. Kicking this video off brings us back to the tank's hull. In the previous video, I stated that detail-wise, or I should say detail accessory-wise, the tank's hull was more or less completed, but there was a couple more pieces that were at that point in the final stages of design, and we're about to head off into production. Well, here we have those components now in hand. This here, along with several other components that are similar to this, have been added to the ECA 1/16 scale product line. This set here is the M1A2 front driver's hatch detail accessory set. And this set here gives you a multitude of detail components in order to flesh out further the bow hatch area on the Heng Long 1/16 scale M1A2 Abrams. The hatch on the model is more or less the correct shape. However, it does lack some details that are found on lots of real examples of these vehicles that I've seen on the internet and floating around. These components over here are all HD 3D printed and give you a bunch of parts in order to outfit not one but two of the 1/16 scale Heng Long M1 Abrams models. In addition to the M1A2 set, I also went ahead and tooled up the version which, from what I was able to tell from the pictures I was using as reference, are more indicative of an M1A1 Abrams. So I do have some good bases covered. The sets also, again, even the M1A1 set gives you enough components for two of these vehicles. This set here suffered some damage from shipping. However, the damage wasn't anything severe, and if anything, the pieces just popped off of their sprues, which you have to do anyway when you actually start the construction. But with that out of the way, let's go ahead and go into what the set actually contains, because it's pretty cool. So first, you'll see that the set does have a bunch of parts. The most notable is this frame that we have here. But before I do mention that, you can see that the set does have a protective guard on it just to protect the fragile details from any sort of impact, and it did the job mostly. And on the top section, we do have these two components here. I'll go ahead and talk about these things first. What these are power boxes for an auxiliary unit, and from what I've seen, if the vehicle has the ability to be fitted with the mine plow or the mine roller, that would plug into this section over here. The unit is very nicely detailed. I was able to get some excellent references, so I was able to get all of the fine, minute geometry on this component present on the CAD file. It's got the fasteners, it's got the plugs in place. It's got basically everything you need that would be found on the real vehicle. This thing here is just basically a drop-in installation. You just have to make sure it's in the proper location on the model, and you just drop it in. You can either glue it on flat by just removing the stem over here, or if you so choose, you could drill a small hole on the top of the model and then just use that as an alignment peg to get the piece secured in place. Either way will work for you. Obviously, the set does contain two of these units. While on the topic of the power boxes, this brings us to another new addition added to the ECA catalog, which is this set that we have here. And this set here is just a standalone set of the M1 Abrams auxiliary power box set. This one here is made with the exact same CAD files that made these following units, so they have all the same details that I just mentioned. Only on this set here, you just get 3 of the power boxes exclusive without all the other bits of accessories that I'm going to mention as the video goes on. The idea for this set is that, one, it's a bit more cost effective compared to the full hatch set, and this set is just intended for someone who is either content with the stock detailing, or they already had scratch built everything, they don't need the other components, or for whatever reason, if they're working on either a Heng Long or any other manufacturers of 1/16 scale Abrams models, you could simply just upgrade it with these parts that we have here. Obviously, one set is enough to equip not 1 but 3 of the 1/16 scale M1 Abrams tank models. With that quick plug out of the way, let's go ahead and review the other parts that are supplied with this set. So with a clean cut snip here, I'm just going to go ahead and amputate the table that we have right here. That, for the most part, did its job quite well. So with the guard removed, you get to see what is beneath. So we have here this rim, and this rim is actually found on the leading edge of the hatch of the vehicle. The piece has all the appropriate detailing found in terms of geometry, as well as even the weld beads. These sections here are fully welded, which again, once mounted to the model, will give it some very nice detail accuracy. The other thing that we have here are these hook mechanisms. The hook mechanism is actually the turret lock, and you have the detailing right over here in full display. You can see it has the correct geometry, as even the fastener details, and we also have the elaborate hook detailing all present. Once these units are fitted in place, you'll see exactly how they flush out. In addition to the hooks, which by the way you can see I give you more than enough for the model, or even two of these vehicles, I also supply you with the actual protector cap for the hinge mechanism. On the Abrams, there are two styles that I saw present, so I went ahead and threw them both onto the model, and again you have extra duplicates for use of whatever you deem fit. The first is this conical section that we have over here. Again, it has the correct geometry as well as the fastener locations. And we have this one over here, which has a slightly different shape on the top portion. I've seen both of these units used interchanged on these M1s, so it's basically choose whichever one works best for you. To install the hatch parts, the first thing you need to do is simply delete the original cap right here that's found on the side portion of the hatch. In order to do this, a dremel with a high-speed removal bit is definitely recommended. As you see, it makes really short work of the component, and at least for a nice flat surface. Obviously, the flatter the better, as it will make a perfect surface for the new unit to be dropped on directly in place. Outside of this, that's really all you need to do deletion-wise found on the original tooling. The little stem that we have here, you actually keep, and you don't mess with that whatsoever, and you just work around it. Once the surface is prepped, it's then time to mount on the replacement cover cap. Like I said before, you do have some options, and for this one here, I'm going to roll with the one with the dimple in it, just because it looks, well, the most interesting to me. Once the unit is removed, you then just simply drop it into place, and you can just use the adhesives to keep it where it needs to be. With the way the kit is designed, there is a small little area over here where you can see a little hole protruding out. You can either just drill this out further with the Dremel, or would punch it out with a needle file, or if you are in a bind, you can simply just snip off the little stem over here and glue on accordingly. Whichever way works for you will work on the piece regardless. When you're installing in a place, you want to make sure that the fasteners are in the appropriate location. They only go on in a certain way on the real unit, so it would help to double check some references just to make sure you don't mount them on cockeyed or anything askew. The next thing to secure on are the hatch extremities themselves. When you remove the part, you want to make sure that the piece has been deburred, and this is easily done with a needle file or just some sandpaper, whichever way will again lead to the same exact result. The clean cut snips do a good work of getting really close to where you need to be, and then the needle file there can finish off the rest. If you pop the piece right over here, as it is pretty fragile over here, fear not, it's not a problem. Just when you're gluing the piece on, just make sure you just butt it up against the part there, and it'll fit together absolutely perfectly. Just remove the amount of material that you deem fit. Once it's flat, you're then good to go. You want to try test fitting it on in place first. You want to make sure you have the correct orientation. Fortunately, with the way the other one's laid out, you can see exactly how the hatch is supposed to be drawn out with the parts glued in place. Just a few drops of super glue, really all that's required. Then you just install accordingly. Do the same with the one on the opposite side. And then there you go. As you can see, the hatch is really taking shape now with all these bits added in place. And the last thing you need to add on, besides the power box here, which I'll get to in a second, is the opening latch. For the latch, I went ahead and utilized this picture here as reference, so you get to see exactly where this piece goes. By the way, this link to, or I should say the link to this image can be found in the video description. It goes right over here. I went ahead and made an indentation. This one, again, you can either snip off the column and glue flush, or you could drill a hole into the hatch and just glue accordingly. Either way, again, will lead to the same results. I'm going to go with the latter. By the way, I utilized a router bit for that, not a standard Dremel bit, which is why I was able to enlarge the hole with a plunge cut as opposed to something else, which would usually break the bit if you try that with that same type of procedure without a router bit. So, with that out of the way, let's go ahead, get this guy lined up, drop him in place, and presto, we now have the hatch fully upgraded. I'd say that's quite a bit of a transformation with the addition of minimal amount of parts. Oh, one other thing I want to mention that I forgot to mention earlier is that included with the set is not just these opaque resin parts that I mentioned, but also the insert for the periscopes is supplied as well. That was a bit of detailing I covered in the previous new product announcement video. It's a drop-in insert, slides in on the bottom, and it gives you the appropriate periscope detailing for the interior portion over here on the driver's hatch. So with the ECA set, you have everything that you need to finish everything up. The very last thing that needs to be fit in place is the auxiliary power box that you see here, but this is going to be added shortly after I apply the texture paint to the model surface. One thing about M1s is that the surface does have a texture paint added in place just to prevent the crew member from slipping and falling off, potentially really injuring himself. So to prevent that, the surfaces on many of the walkway areas are coated in a special texture paint. I'm going to go ahead and apply that to this model first before I go ahead and add this piece in place, because otherwise it tends to be in the way. But aside from that, for installation, you pretty much get the gist on how it gets fitted and where it goes. And here's the hatch with the last of the details fitted. This would be the auxiliary power box as well as also the periscope inserts. As you can see, they've been slipped in place to get an idea exactly what everything looks like once fully completed. These are not yet glued on, they're just taped on for the moment. Again, just so you get an idea on what the piece looks like in its final format. As for the power box, this was glued in place, but I did this after I applied the texture paint here to the sections of the tank's hull. This, of course, I'll be going over in more depth in the actual model showcase video for this project, but needless to say, it's easier to go ahead and fit this in place after the texture paint is added. Stepping forward a little bit takes us to the model with its coat of primer applied, and now that everything's in its single solid coat, you really get to appreciate those details that I mentioned before being fitted to the hull hatch area. This, of course, is going to look even better when it goes into base coat, as well as also its various weathering techniques. But of course, that's something that will be mentioned in another video. The last new accessory I want to show on the table for the hull is the set that we have right here. This is something that is not necessarily that new. I actually produced and designed these sets about a year ago when I first designed the taillight modification for the M1. However, this is really the first time I had the opportunity to get a production set on table for you all to enjoy. As for what it is, well, this is the 1/16 scale M1 Abrams HD 3D printed rear taillight guard set. On many versions of the M1 Abrams, the taillight found on the right-hand side actually has this elaborate guard that can be fitted in place. As for what it is, honestly, it's outside my pay grade. However, any tankers out there who are watching this, you can definitely put that in the comment section below as to why it has only one of these units fitted to the vehicle. As for the set that we have here, they're all HD 3D printed with as much detailing and with the correct geometry I was able to find on these parts as possible. With this set here, you have enough components to outfit 5 M1 Abrams tanks in 1/16 scale. So again, one set will keep it going for quite some time. The sets here will work with both the ECA taillights as well as also the original Heng Long taillights that are found on the model. As for this one, it popped off during shipping, so you get a good idea on what the component looks like. So right there you can see the elaborate geometry found on the face section. You also see the shelf detailing right here. The weld beads are integrally printed on. And we also have the clamp detailing, all present with its fastener and its weld bead detailing as well. The unit is designed to be a simple slip-on installation, just like it is on the real unit. As for what that looks like, well, here we have the Heng Long model in question. These are upgraded with the ECA taillights, and here goes the cover. And it just slips on, just like so. A little drop of glue later, and you're good to go. Moving on from the last batch of parts brings us back to the turret, and this is where we're going to basically focus for the remainder of this video. So the very first parts I want to mention for the turret are the set that we have here, which is the new ECA 1/16 scale HD 3D printed M1 Abrams toe shackle detail set. Bit of a mouthful, as usually the cases with these things, but the name tells exactly what it is. On the Heng Long pattern of M1 Abrams, the kit does supply you with a basic set of toe cables. And even though the toe cables are okay for what they are, they can use a little bit of extra detailing, and that's what we have right here. This set supplies you with the clamps and the other sets of details that are found on the side of the M1 Abrams turret in order to secure the cables in place. With the way this set works is that you're actually going to recycle the original Heng Long kit supplied rubber toe cables. Although you don't have to, you can easily swap them out with something else that from another manufacturer, either be metal or whatever other material, but regardless, you can still utilize the exact same parts here for either the stock one or the extra one. Or I should say the aftermarket one. I don't want to get anyone confused. So on this fret here, we have enough components to outfit 2 M1 Abrams tanks. This is in case you are building a model and you perhaps break a piece, or if you play your cards right, you can just outfit 2 of these vehicles if you have the opportunity to have 2 of them in your collection, and many people out there do. So the set contains the following components. Unfortunately, some of the pieces popped off while I was removing them from the securement bag, but regardless, everything is still intact, and what you see here is basically what you get. So starting with the front section, you'll see that we have these little scoop sections that are found here. By the way, all of the detail components have the appropriate geometry as well as also the appropriate detailing found on them. This is going to be more prevalent on some of the other parts back here, but everything that you see here is as close to the real one I can possibly make it, and I had some very good reference photographs of all these pieces. Also, all of the detail components that you see here are integrally welded, so all their weld bead details are printed onto the parts, and you, the builder, do not have to do any other type of sculpting in order to get these pieces to look any better. So you're welcome. Jumping back to the parts, as I was alluding to before, takes us to the front section, and you'll see that we have these little scoop type sections here on the front. On the front portion of the M1 Abrams turret, there is this receptacle that would be welded to the front side, and this here would be, it's not really a section for the toe eye to plug into, but it's more or less a guard, just I guess to prevent it from getting snagged. The piece here is a direct replacement for the one found on the Heng Long model. If I go ahead and grab the turret, you'll see what the kit gives you, and you'll see exactly how much more improved the new one here really is. With the camera readjusted, right there is the scoop that's found on the Heng Long model. It's nice that they give it to you, however, you can see that it's a bit anemic compared to the ECA counterpart. Obviously, to install this one in place, this one here has to go. Fortunately, with these pieces being molded in plastic, this is very easily done with some swipes of some really abrasive sandpaper, and then you can just polish it down from there. Of course, you do have to do the same to the opposite side, as it is a mirror image on this vehicle. The next components would be right over here, and these would be these T-shaped objects. The T-shaped object is actually how the toe eye connects and plugs onto the side of the Abrams turret. If I have one of these pieces over here, you get to see exactly how the piece looks in better detail. On the real unit, or I should say on the model over here, you have the kit supplied toe eye, and you'll see how this thing just plugs in place, just like so. On the real unit, you would have to pivot the piece like this in order to remove or remount the tow cable when being used. You'll notice that everything here, with the exception of the pieces over here, are a plug-on type assembly, where you have the little piece, you just pop it off of the sprue, like these ones did accidentally. You drill a corresponding hole onto the model, and the piece just gets glued in place, and you're good to go. The next set of parts are all these little hooks that we have here. And this is probably the most prolific component on this set. Not because that, well, actually it is partially because there are lots found on the model, but there are the most frail bits on the entire set. So, me being a modeler, I do know the struggle about some of these parts potentially breaking. So what I went ahead and did was I gave you an ample amount. There are plenty on this set over here to outfit not just one, but two of the M1s, and you also have several as why not spares. As for how many are needed, believe it or not, they actually are integrally molded onto the Heng Long tooling. So you can see there's one here, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So 10 per side, or I should say 10 per tank, and then you have the others that I mentioned before. The units, again, have the appropriate geometry to them. Hopefully this comes out on camera. And they just drop directly in place, like you see here. To fit the tow cable in place, you are going to have to amputate these little plugs that we have right here that are integrally molded on. Quick little job with a clean cut snip, and then you could go ahead and just drop this one directly into place. After the model is fully painted and weathered and you're installing these pieces for real, a small little drop of thin super glue should be more than suffice at keeping these things at bay. The next components on the set are these that we have. Oops, see, I told you these things pop off pretty easily. The next thing we have here are these receptacles that we have right here on the back. This was another component that I gave you extras for basically a why not reason. In reality, there's only two found on the vehicle, one per each side. This here is the rear receptacle, and it's basically how the tow eye just gets secured in place. There are no type of locks or anything like that. The unit just slides into this section over here like a holster, and then everything is held in place with the other clips and the T-mount that I mentioned before. This component here, I actually had some fun with tracking down some real ones. And as much of the real component was brought into this unit over here. The real one is actually made from a stamping. It's a single piece of steel that has some cuts in it and then pressed into the shape, and then from there it's welded to the tank. You can see the stems right here, as well as the weld beads that are again present. And it stands up from the model, or I should say up from the side of the turret, again giving you some very nice realism on this component. Once these are fitted in place, you'll really get to see just how much more improved the side of the tank really is. To install the tow cable mounts, the first thing you need to do is to amputate the kit supplied ones. So these little half round sections here on either side need to go. Do that, your best friend, the Dremel with the high-speed removal bit, is utilized. After the Dremel, a little bit of sandpaper later, the surface will be ready for the installation of the rest and parts. Let me go ahead and do the same thing to the opposite side, and then get back to the actual installation. Before you can actually mount on the tow cable mounts, the first thing you need to do is actually mark the locations on where the components need to go. Fortunately, with the way the Heng Long component is rendered out, this actually does a nice job with sorting everything out for you. Once the tow cable is just placed onto the model as it is with the way the kit is designed, with a pencil, I go ahead and mark the portion over here where the front scoop needs to go. I'm actually going to make a little tick right over here where the T section needs to be fitted. And then I put a little mark on each location where we have a tie down. Also on the back portion, this gets marked as well. And now that I have this all marked out, at this point here, I could actually go ahead and drill the units out further. But before I'm going to do that, on some of the components, like the other clips that don't have the center holes fitted in place, I could go ahead and just make a nice little mark now with the pencil. And basically, thanks to this, I'm able to drill these sections out further, and this will then allow me the exact locations to input the new resin components. Obviously, you need to do the exact same procedure on the opposite side in order to get a good idea on where everything needs to be fitted in place. On the cable itself, because of the new addition of parts, you are going to amputate some of these little mounting pegs here because they are no longer needed. Namely, the one here, and perhaps the one back here. I haven't quite figured it out yet, see if it's going to be needed, but I'll definitely circle back to that once I have that figured out. The one here on the front you can keep because this will help line it up, and it'll give you just an extra mounting point to keep this thing at bay. However, now that's all taken care of, with a Dremel, I'll go ahead and take care of the drilling of these sections off camera. And here you can see what the side looks like with the clips fitted in place. They just get dropped into the appropriate locations, and once the glue sets, you're ready to go. Currently, the rear section here and the T section are not yet glued on. These are going to be glued on after painting because they need to be hooked up to the tow cable so that when they get installed, it's the best way to avoid any sort of potential problems. On the cable itself, this too has been modified. The stems have been shortened on the front and the rear section. The ones in the middle have been completely amputated, and also with a Dremel with a high-speed removal bit, I removed more of the material from the molded in clip. This was done so that the piece can fit better into the new clips that we see here. The unit, of course, is a mirror image on the opposite side. And here you get a good idea on what it looks like with the tow cable fitted in place. Keep in mind, the tension is pulling it off of the clip. However, when it comes time for installation, a small little drop of thin super glue are going to be added to each of these sections, which are going to do a good part with keeping these things where they need to be. The one thing I want to mention is that these clips are very frail. It's one of the side effects of adding the better detailing. Yes, you have better surface detailing. However, the frailness and fragility do go up. So this is something that you do have to consider. However, the pieces, once fully assembled and painted and installed, look fantastic. Also, at this point here, it's missing the front T section, which again is something that also gets added after the unit is installed. And it's a little tricky to get on camera right now, but you get a good idea on exactly what it looks like once fitted in place. However, the rear section over here definitely was able to be slipped in place. And again, you just see just how much more extra accuracy and detailing it gives the model overall. Progressing further takes us to another new turret accessory, which is the 1/16 scale HE 3D printed CIP panel set. The CIP panels are a very distinctive bit of detailing found on US military vehicles, specifically from the Iraq War timeframe and moving forward. The kit does have these panels integrally molded onto the turret, but which is typically the case, they are extremely basic. The set that we have here is intended to replace the stock ones with something that gives you much better detail accuracy. The sets are offered in two configurations. This is the 4-pack, and then we also have the 2-pack. 2-pack is enough for one vehicle. The 4-pack, obviously, enough for two. Regardless of the set that you get, the detailing on the components are going to be identical. With the components in hand, you get to see the detailing that are found on these parts. So the CIP panels are pretty simple for what they are. We have a standard square plate here. The real detailing is with the end corners. On the real units, there are these Velcro sections that are found on the four corners, and I went ahead and incorporated them as much as possible on the model here. These sets are ready to go from the get-go. You just simply snip them off and you secure them in place on whatever position you deem fit. I've seen these things fitted in a bunch of different locations on these vehicles, so you do have some artistic licensing available to you. To compare and contrast, here we have the stock Heng Long model with the CIP panels integrally printed on. As you can see, the ECA ones are a huge improvement over the stock counterparts. As for securing them on in place, well, let's go ahead and show you how to do that. Before you can mount the new panels in place, it's really intended to delete the original ones that are found on the model. This is not something that you have to do, but it's something I definitely recommend. To do this, I'm going to actually utilize my palm sander over here. This one here is a Hercules, a Harbor Freight Special, and it's actually really, really good and high quality. I recommend picking one up, specifically if you do a lot of models like I do, specifically my larger scale ones. I got here about 150 grit, or I believe it's 250 grit, either one or the other, sandpaper, and this is going to be awesome for just polishing down these areas nice and smooth. When you're utilizing the palm sander, you want to make sure you're sanding evenly. You don't want to over sand in one direction or another. You can potentially utilize just hand sanding for this, but it's going to take a little while, and the palm sander is definitely the smarter way to go. I'm not going to show on camera the palm sanding, but let's just cut across one that's already completed, and you get to see the installation of the new parts. The palm sander does short work of the work that's required. However, I will say that if you are going to use the palm sander, it would be best to take the mantlet off because it just opens up this area here and it's less obstructions in the way. Either way, I was able to do the job just fine. Here go the plates over here. I went ahead and snipped off the little stem. Again, you could either drill a hole in the piece here or just snip it off flat and then just glue it on when the time comes in the appropriate location. However, I'm not going to glue these on just yet. These are going to be painted off the model because I'm probably going to be painting them with a different color, just to add a bit of different variation in color pop to the build, and there's no point masking it once it's already a separate piece. So I'm just going to go ahead and glue this on at the tail end of the build. Either way, though, you really get to see the piece taking shape, and you get to see what the unit looks like with the new panels fitted in place. My opinion, definitely an improvement over the kit originals. While on the front of the turret takes us to the next set that we have here, which is the HD 3D printed ECA 1/16 scale M1 Abrams Coax MG upgrade set. So of course a distinctive and iconic bit of detailing found on the M1 Abrams is its Coax MG, and it's fitted on the vehicle, and we have the shroud that goes over the front barrel section, and it's actually standing off from the vehicle itself. The Heng Long model does give you this component, but again, it's very basic and overly simplistic with its basic detailing. Can you work with it? Yeah, I've done in the past. However, this does open some room for improvement, so here we have the set in present that's intended to make the model just a little bit more advanced. So first you'll see that the set contains more than one of these units. There are enough on here to outfit 5 1/16 scale M1 Abrams. The sets are extremely detailed, where we have the supports with the correct geometry, the weld detailing is of course present, and we have the shroud section that is printed hollow. If you look, you'll also see in a star pattern the internal struts that are connected to these sections over here. These units are as detailed, again, as I can humanly possibly make them. In order to secure these in place, you are going to have to amputate the original unit that we have here. This just gets deleted flush, and then the new ECA one just gets dropped directly into place. With the way the set is designed, it should just drop directly onto this area over here without any sort of extra modifications ever being necessary. Because the units are printed hollow, you're going to have the flash effect go all the way through and being able to be witnessed on the opposite side. And on top of that, because they are standing off from the mantlet, you will have some flash bleed off in this section over here as it would on the actual unit. So again, you get some more added accuracy as well as extra detail fidelity. To install the coax, the first thing you need to do is to amputate the original molded in unit right over here. You can do this in a couple different ways. You don't have to take the turret apart. If you're careful enough, you can probably just use a file that down, or even a dremel. However, since the model does have the turret in its disassembled state, I'm going to go ahead and remove the mantlet from the bulk of the turret, which should make, for me anyhow, a bit easier to get in here with the dremel. To remove the material, once again, I'm going to utilize the Dremel with the high-speed removal bit. I'm just going to go ahead and carefully amputate the material that's just not necessary. So a good chunk has been removed. From here, I'm going to utilize a needle file and to polish down the rest. You don't want to over-grind. If you remove too much material, that can be a bit problematic. Okay, so the file and the sandpaper did some short work on the material there. As you can see, it's nice and flush. I did use a round needle file here just to puncture out any of the plastic residue that's remainder from the removal process. It tends to fill in the hole. It just chips away without any sort of problems. At this point here, you're ready for the installation of the coax. Before I do that though, I am going to go ahead and get the mantlet back fitted in place because it makes it a bit more easier to work in that regard. And after the mantlet is nice and prepped, at that point there, you could drop the new unit in place. When you're installing the part, just add a little bit of super glue on the feet section, and then you have to carefully just line it up, make sure it's squared away where it needs to be. You may have to adjust the yaw a little bit during the installation, but if you're careful and you make sure that all of the axes are lined up accordingly, you should have a pretty problem-free installation. And once the unit is installed, it definitely looks much better compared to the kit supplied counterpart. And here we have another brand spanking new item to the ECA 116 catalog, which is the M1 Abrams HD 3D printed turret detail set. This here is quite an elaborate set, and is basically follows what I did with the hull with the side skirt sets that I announced a little while ago. The Heng Long model, again, gives you some good detailing, it gives you some nice geometry, but again, it's lacking several details, and this set here is intended to take the model and enhance it further. This set here is going to contain a bunch of parts for the upper and even, yes, the lower section of the tank's turret. Where to start? Alright, well, I guess it's best to start with this set over, or I should say this sprue over here, and work our way from left to right. So the first thing that we have is this weird triangular shaped object, and on the bottom portion of the M1 Abrams turret there is this elaborate guard mechanism that is found on the lower pan. As for what it protects, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, no Abrams guys out there go down my throat if I get this wrong, but I believe that this has to do with the ammunition magazine area, and there's some sort of a vent or a drainage system or something along those lines that's found on the lower portion there, and this guard here is intended to protect it from any sort of incoming rounds. The sets, by the way, as you can see, are all HD 3D printed and give you enough for, again, not just one, but two, and if not, sometimes even more, 1/16 scale M1. So you have plenty of spare parts on hand in case a problem were to emerge. But as for these over here, you only get two. So again, one for each of these vehicles. As for the component, they have the appropriate geometry to them. They are also fully welded. And it's a nice bit of detailing to enhance your model. That's the last of the detailing, or I should say that's the only detailing in the set for the turret bottom pan. The remainder of the turret detailing set is for the upper section. So the first we have here are the bin handles. The handles are the same exact handles that were found on the bin on the hull, and these are also the same type of pattern found on the M60 series of vehicles. Also, as a quick side note, I do not have a production set on hand, but I actually have a standalone set of these bin handles specifically intended for use on the Tongday M60. So if you're working on one of those really cool vehicles, I have the bin handles listed on the ECA catalog, HD 3D printed, and they are the exact same parts that we have here. Funny how American tanks have lots of standardization on them. But back to this set, we have the bin handles, and these are intended for use on the ones for the top storage bin. Here go the molded ones found on the Heng Long model, and here you can see the ECA counterparts. Obviously, they are much more advanced in comparison. The next thing on the set over here are these various little tabs and fasteners that you see presently. These here are found on the real blowout panels on the M1A2 Abrams, and if we compare it to what's found here on the stock one, you'll see that on the stock Heng Long unit we just have these fasteners integrally molded on. Well, on the real M1 they're a little bit more advanced than what we have here, and that's what we have seen on the fret. There are two sizes and both are needed for the blowout panels. As for where they go, you'll see that momentarily. However, if I go ahead and zoom in, you could probably see the shape of the tabs and the retention fasteners in better light. Once these things are painted and weathered and fitted in place, they are really going to shine, and it's going to really take this model to the next level. But that's true for basically all the parts. The next thing I have here is another fret. First, we have some more of these little grab handles because why not? I had some space, so I threw them on there. But the remainder of the components, besides those little plates from again, I had some space. So you do have plenty of extra in case you have a oopsie moment. But really what we have here are these fasteners. And these fasteners here are for actually the front portion of the M1 Abrams turret. If you look at the front of the M1 Abrams, on either side here and here, there are these four distinctive fasteners that are found in this location. And these are obviously absent on the Heng Long model. Well, the ECA set here gives you said missing fasteners. The reason why I have left and right is because, well, this is the orientation here of the components. So you have the parts right over here, you just snip them off, you index them appropriately on the model, and you could then secure them in place, and it just helps you with the alignment. As for the installation of the fasteners, you simply drill out the locations after you mark them with a pencil, and these guys here just slip directly in place. And it would help if I knew which side was left or right. So this here's the one on the left, this one is on the right, and as you can see, I have the orientation with the appropriate type direction. The very last runner is this plate that we have here that has these lift hooks in place. And these are again back on the blowout panels. So if we go ahead and look at the blowout panels themselves, you will see that again the kit gives you them and they are integrally supplied. But again, if we compare that to the ECA one, not only are they more three-dimensional, but they are also better detailed with the design and geometry of the clasp, as well as the retention fastener. You also have two options available, where we have the hook in the open position and the hook in the closed position. This thing can flip around, so it's not uncommon to see these in either way, and with the way this set's laid out, you can position them in any way you deem fit. And you probably, if you can play your cards right, you could probably outfit more than one vehicle. So there's a lot of options, again, available to the builder. And again, gives added value to the sets. The very first detail part from the set that needs to be fitted is the guard. This is best done first because once the outer extremities start getting fitted out, trying to get access to the bottom over here becomes a bit problematic, and you could accidentally break something. So that's why I like to do this first. One other thing that I did off camera is I permanently attached the lower pan to the upper turret hull sections, and this was done with adhesives as well as with the kit supply fasteners, and I went ahead and blended in the fasteners with some bodywork in order to make for a nice seamless appearance. This is something, by the way, that is optional and it's elective, and it's not something that you have to do in order to get the part fitted in place. It's just something that I personally like to do because it makes for a better detailed build, in my opinion. But if for whatever reason you still want to get access to the inner portion of the turret, yeah, you can still install this piece here and leave the original mounting fasteners exposed, and you could have the part still be able to be disassembled. In order to install the part, basically it's just monkey see, monkey do. I utilize my 1/35 scale Dragon M1A2 over here, and I basically just mirrored as much as possible. Then the unit was snipped off of the sprue. I marked it with a pencil, make sure everything was appropriately in the right area, and then some drops of CA later, and the piece has been permanently attached. If I'm not mistaken, I believe there is a hole somewhere underneath this section over here. As for what it's for and what does it look like, unfortunately I don't have any of that information, so I'm just going to leave it solid for the time being. However, for anyone out there in YouTube land does know exactly what is under here, feel free to let me know in the comment section, or even better, point me to a link that shows it so I can go ahead and have that bit of detailing on this example here. But carrying on, takes us now to the upper extremity of all the detail sets. Flipping the turret over, you can see me going through the motions of getting the areas prepped for the installation of the new parts. First thing that I took care of was I deleted the molded in grab handles found on the storage bins. In order to do this, as well as removing the other parts, I utilized the Dremel with the high-speed removal bit. I was carefully able to just basically mill away the extra bit of material, and whatever was left was then polished away with just some sandpaper, leaving for the results that we see here. But however, right before I went ahead and polished everything down further, with a Dremel, I drilled out a hole on each of the section that you see here. This is to align the new piece so that it drops in place. With the way the kit is, the handle locations are correct, so when you're polishing it away, you're going to be confused on exactly where the new one's got to go. So what I simply do is that before I remove it fully, I drill these sections out, so it gives me both an area to drop the new one in, and also it's a visual cue on exactly where they need to go. I also went ahead and looked at some pictures of the real one, and you can see I drew an arrow on which direction the unit will face. And the hole is drilled on the back end of each of the units so that when I drop them in, they will have the correct orientation. This was done to both on either side. At the moment over here, I'm going through the motion of deleting these units, and you can see that these ones here I already took care of with the high-speed removal bit. Note, I don't go too deep with it, because if you gouge the section over here, well, then you're not exactly helping yourself. So I just go ahead and just remove a little bit of material off of the surface, and then the sandpaper will take care of the rest. On the lift hooks over here, you see I went ahead and drilled out the center portions where the fasteners go for the same reasons that I touched upon before. From here, I can go ahead, switch over to the high-speed removal bit, and delete further, and then once these are gone, I'll know exactly where the units need to be placed. For the ones over here, it's kind of easy to figure out. They're just dead center on these areas, so that one's really easily done. But one thing that's also interesting to see that the kit forgot to actually mold into detailing on this section over here, so it's, you know, there we go. That's one less thing I need to drill out, or polish out for that matter. Anyway, let me continue with the actual procedure. And after a few moments with some sandpaper, you can see what the unit looks like now, prepped and ready for the new part installation. In addition to sanding down these components, the other fasteners were polished down as well, and I also went ahead and did the drill trick. From here, I could go ahead, remove stuff off of the sprue, and start gluing them on in place. And here's the rear section with all of the detail fittings now fitted in place. So, starting with the bin lids, you can see what it looks like now with the new grab handles. Much better detail compared to the stock one. And here you can see the blowout panels with the replacement fasteners now fitted in place, as well as the lifting hooks. Like I said before, the lifting hooks, you have lots of artistic licensing available, as these things can pivot around freely and can flop around. So basically you can have that on which way seems the most aesthetically pleasing for you with the mounting. Same is also true, by the way, for these locking fasteners that we have here on top of the round sections. For the retention clips over here, this is where there's actually a method to the madness, and you can see that I actually went ahead and drew in arrows. So basically, what the left and the right is exactly where the open tang section is on the clips, and on the top portion over here, on the right-hand side, the open portion is over here, while on the left-hand side, the open portion is actually right here on the top. Also, the opening for the ones on the top are the open section is downward on the right-hand side, while on the left-hand side, it is reversed. And it is a mirror image, by the way, on the one here on the bottom. On the one on the bottom over here, the open section is towards the bottom, and on the left-hand section is actually towards the top. And actually, screw me, it's a mirror image. It's actually the exact same image, just repeated on either way. And I literally just realized that now while looking at these sets. During the installation of these parts, I actually had a very good photograph. Matter of fact, I'll go ahead and throw it into the video description below. So if you have one of these sets and you're installing these components, you have a very good resource on to monkey see and monkey do your way through the installation. But regardless, they go on very, very easily with the holes drilled in place. I just plug them in, and once the glue sets, you will have the appropriate detailing that you have here. The next thing to mount on are the fasteners for the front. And to do this, I'm going to go back to the runner that we have right here. So as I mentioned before, the runner actually has an alignment jig on it. As you can see, we have left and right. What I went ahead and did was I snipped away the fasteners that are going to be needed. And what I'm going to do is with a Dremel with a micro bit on it, I'm actually going to drill these sections out. And this is now going to become a gauge, or I should say a template, on where the spacing and the location has to go for me to mark the roof and drill them out further. So to do that, so there we have it. Set that aside. And now I'm just going to go ahead and place this onto the model. But before I do, I'm actually going to go ahead and cut out the units. To do this, I have my router bit here on the Dremel. Okay, so the one in my hand right now is the left-hand side. And I'm just going to line it up right here onto the turret. I am still going to look at an example of a real one to see exactly where on this section over here it needs to be fitted, and also vice versa. But once I figure that out, at least the spacing of the bolts are going to be ironed out, and there's going to be no guesswork behind that. Okay, now with those marked up, I'm just going to go ahead and drill them out. After the holes are drilled out, the bolts just get glued directly into their appropriate locations, and once fit in place, you really get to see just how much more complete they make the model look compared to leaving them absent. Obviously, the template does a great job with removing any sort of guesswork on the location, as well as also the pitch. This, in combination with the other details that I referenced before, really do a great job at fleshing out the model further. Continuing on takes us to two of the very last new items we're going to be announcing in this video, and both of these items are actually retooling of older components that have been on the ECA Abrams catalog now for 10 or so years. Both of these items have officially retired the sets that I'm about to mention, and those old units are no longer in production and have been scrubbed off the catalog, with these new units now replacing them. The first of these two units is a set that we have here on the table right in front of you. As for what this is, well, this is the new redesigned HD 3D printed 1/16 M1A2 Abrams CITV lens set. The Heng Long M1 Abrams does supply you with the CITV lens, and it's a two-piece assembly, and you can see both the components right here on the table. The part assembles pretty well, as you can see, just plugs together, and huzzah, you're all set. Unfortunately, one of the biggest omissions on the Heng Long model is what we have right here, or the lack thereof. There is no detailing whatsoever on the inside of the CITV lens, which is great. So, one detail modification that I originally designed about 10 years ago was a clear resin insert for this exact same component. And it basically just glues in on the inside, and you are all set. However, as I mentioned in the hubcap video that I posted a little while ago now, I am no longer going to be producing clear cast resin components in any scale, be it 1/6 or 1/16. So all of the cast resin parts that are comprised of clear resin have been removed off the catalog and are no longer available. In their place, I wanted to go ahead and redesign the set, so that's what I've done over here. Here you can see the new replacement sets, and these are superior to the older ones in every measurable way. So the new sets are made out of HD 3D print and have the appropriate internal detailing. So we have the appropriate depth and the appropriate phase detailing for the CITV lens. The set comes with enough components to assemble two of the CITV lenses, so one set can equip two 1/16 Heng Long M1 Abrams. The set contains not just the inserts themselves, but it also contains a little section here of clear Lexan plastic. As you can see with the way this set is designed, you have this little inset right over here, and this is designed so that the Lexan can slide in right in between the lens, and it'll give you the appropriate clear section that is required. And this is where the original cast resin ones really did fall short. Even though the parts were supposedly clear resin, trying to cast clear resin is a major pain in the ass. And it never really comes out clear. Sometimes it's somewhat clear, but mostly it's translucent. And with this one here, it really would be better if it was a clear piece. And nothing beats clear better than, well, a piece of Lexan. So for this one here, we actually have a clear Lexan insert that gets slipped into place, giving you the internal detailing. To install this component to the kit supply part, it's really easily done. So with some super glue, you add it to the outer confines here of the part. Like so. You could even add a little drop of glue right here on the side sections. As long as you don't get any glue into the channel where the clear plastic piece needs to be inserted. Then this guy here just slides directly into place like you see. And that's basically it. From here, once the glue fully sets, I'm actually going to paint the inside here with a little bit of flat black, and then that'll be the perfect point to then slide in the clear plastic piece in a moment. Skipping forward a little bit, you get to see the inside now fully painted with the flat black. And you can also see the lens fitted in place. Because the material is a Lexan type material, it cuts very well and also files very easily, and it doesn't shatter like standard acrylic does. Once the piece is fitted to shape, it just slides into that slot that I mentioned before, and you can see it's tacked in place with two little drops of white glue. I like to use white glue for glass. You don't want to use super glue because when super glue sets, you have that white foggy stuff, and that's something that could ruin a clear lens like you see here. The Elmer's glue, or I should say the white glue in comparison, dries absolutely clear, and when it's dry, it will not have any sort of that residue effect that I just mentioned before. At this point here, this guy is actually ready for installation, and to do that, I just drop him in place as per the kit original. Once the piece is fitted, you can see just how much more improved it looks compared to the way we had it originally. And this brings us to the very last new item that I'm going to be mentioning in this video, which is the 1/16 scale M1 Abrams HD 3D printed loader's hatch periscope set. So what we have here is an HD 3D printed replacement periscope for the Heng Long M1 Abrams loader's hatch. So here we have the loader's hatch right here, and this is the stock loader's hatch. As you can see, the periscope area is just an open cavity, as was true for the CITV lens, and the same is also true for the cupola, but that's something I'm going to be talking about in the actual model showcase video for this vehicle here, and that's something you definitely want to check out. But what we have here is a replacement lens for this. So this guy here replaces the stock periscope with a drop-in unit. This unit is fully detailed with the appropriate geometry of the bottom base with the bevel, and we also have the armored box here for the periscope cover itself. The box is just like the real one, where it's fabricated in the same manner, and I even have the weld bead detailing on the appropriate locations, so again you get that higher detail fidelity. And on the inside you have the periscope itself, or I should say the periscope housing. Just like with the CITV lens, there is a small little slot for the Lexan plastic, which is also supplied in order to give you that detailing. One other thing I also want to mention is that on the ECA catalog, I have a straight-up cast resin replacement for the Heng Long loader's hatch, which does give you far better detailing compared to the current out-of-the-box offering. And this set here can also be utilized on that part. In fact, that's exactly what I'm going to be doing on this build over here, and you'll see me modify the ECA resin one to fit the new one. In the past, the ECA hatch was offered in two configurations. One was in standard opaque resin, and the other was in the clear or translucent stuff. As I mentioned before, the translucent option is no longer available, and the set here can be piggybacked off of the other opaque set. In fact, I'll go ahead by the time this video drops and have a special version of that hatch where you get the cast resin hatch with this set over here to go with it. And if you're wondering to yourself, well, John, why don't you just go ahead and have a completely brand new replacement hatch? Well, the answer is that is something that I do want to eventually do. However, with the time restraints that I do have with this particular project, it's just not feasible at this particular time. At some point down the road, I probably will go ahead and do that, but for the immediate future as we have right now, I'm going to be having the set in a hybrid type configuration. So again, you could buy these components listed on the catalog as a standalone set, or you can get a special edition cast resin unit that has the cast resin hatch and these components supplied with it. As for how to install them, that is something I'm going to be going over momentarily. But before I do want to go ahead and separate these two, so you get to at least see what I was referring to. So there you have the slot right there on the inside. This is for the clear plastic to slide in place, thus giving you the external detailing of the lens itself. As for how this works, well, again, you'll see that momentarily. And here we have the hatch periscope, also primed in flat black. And this guy is also ready for the installation of the lens. The lens is the same Lexan material that I mentioned before, and it has been trimmed to shape. This guy here, as one would imagine, just drops directly into the slot, like so. Once the unit is fit in place, you can then mount it onto the model. Either you can modify the stock original hatch, or, like I'm doing with this one here, I'm utilizing one of my old school cast resin hatches in order for the application. The original molded in periscope was amputated, and this one's just going to drop directly in place as you see here. Once the unit is glued in place, it's going to give the appropriate detailing, and it's going to be much more enhanced compared to the way it was originally. And here's the unit fitted to the ECA hatch, and the hatch itself has been mounted to the tank. Hopefully I can get this on camera, but you can see the hatch now fitted, and you can see the new periscope mounted, and it really does improve the old school ECA hatch. If it'll improve this type of hatch, it'll also improve the stock hatch that I mentioned before. Because the unit is hollow, the prism is nice and clear. And it also has that excellent sheen to it whenever light hits it, and it'll look very true to form to the real unit. As you can see, with the addition of these detail components over here, this greatly improves the surface level detailing found on the Heng Long model, and it definitely takes this basic model and makes it punch far and well above its own weight. With these detail components fitted in place, I'm actually really close to getting this model to the point where I could go ahead and get it painted, and then of course it could slide off into final completion. But all that information is going to be discussed in the model showcase video for this particular build here, which will definitely be making its debut shortly after this model is completed, which should be definitely sooner than later. And that is actually the perfect point to wrap up this new product announcement video for the 1/16 scale EastCoastArmory.com M1 Abrams main battle tank detail part sets. If you like this video, be sure to subscribe to this channel, where it's a fantastic way of keeping in the loop of new posted content, being new product announcement videos like the one that you just watched, or the other smaller scale model showcase videos and larger scale project update videos when they frequently get posted. Another way to keep in the loop of new posted content is by liking us on Facebook. There, I have more photographs of not just this particular build here, but the other smaller and larger scale builds that have been seen on this channel previously. Of course, finally, do not forget to swing by EastCoastArmory.com for more 1/6 and 1/16 scale builds and detail components. Thanks again. I'll be seeing you all again on the next one. Till then.